Hello everybody, my name is Nathan, and I am the man with a cartoon obsession. Today's video is pretty special because tomorrow marks 10 years since the formation of Studio Trigger. That's right, Studio Trigger was founded on August 22nd, 2011 by former Gainax employees Hiroyuki Imaishi and Masahiko Otsuka. In celebration of them being around for 10 years, I decided to rank all of their anime series. Before we get into that though, I would greatly appreciate it if you could take just a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more animation related content, usually every other Saturday. Back to the ranking, here are the rules. I'm only looking at the actual TV anime series, so I'm not including movies like Primare or ONAs like Inferno Cop. The reason for that is I wanted this to be a straightforward ranking, and I don't feel like it would be a fair placement to put movies and ONAs along with the TV series since there are different things to consider with each format. Also, I was debating whether or not I should include Darling in the Franxx in this list. I even asked the Trigger subreddit for some help with that, and with their help and some other information I found, I decided not to. Darling in the Franxx is mainly an A1 Pictures and Cloverworks production that Trigger just so happened to work on. Plus, Trigger themselves don't even have it listed on their website. I will say though, if I were to include it, it would be higher up than it would probably be on most people's lists. Even with these omissions, I still have 8 shows to rank. Of course, the most important thing to remember for this list is that this is based on my own opinions. The popularity and reception of these shows won't really play a factor here, because I feel like that would just make the list a little too predictable for my taste. Since this list will be based on my own opinions, I would love to know yours as well. Feel free to leave your own rankings in the comments. Now that I got all that out of the way, let's get down to business ranking Studio Trigger's anime series. Number 8. When supernatural battles became commonplace. Before I start talking about this one, I should preface this by saying I don't think Trigger has a bad show in their catalog. That being said, something had to end up at the bottom of the list, and that something just so happens to be when supernatural battles became commonplace. Right off the bat, you can tell this doesn't look like a standard Trigger show. I don't think generic is the right word to describe how this looks visually, but Trigger has a distinct style, and while some of their nuances are present here, and while it is still solid visually speaking, this show looks like it could have been done by just about any other studio. Of course, visuals aren't everything, but you won't hear me complain about the art style in any other Trigger show, because I love their style to death. Honestly, this show had a lot of potential. The concept is interesting enough. A group of students suddenly get superpowers for some inexplicable reason, and they have to learn how to use them. While the word battles is in the title, we don't see too many of them. There are a couple, but this is more of a straight-up comedy anime than an action series. As for the comedic aspect, this show is pretty funny in the first half. Each character has their own quirk, and they're each charming in their own way. Although the main guy, Jirai Ando, is a little too over the top and eccentric for my tastes, that's the entire point of his character, but his antics feel forced to me throughout the series, like how he has to spell everything in a complicated way, or just how he talks with an overdramatic tone and with added theatrics.
Hey, Chief you. I totally wasn't expecting you to come today. Oh, I'm kidding. Everything's fine. It's all just a joke, okay?
Speaking of forced, I said the show was really funny in the first half. Well, in the second half it starts to take itself too seriously. That can be done well, but here it just doesn't make any sense. There are new aspects that come out of nowhere, new plot points that don't feel like they fit, and the whole show just starts to feel disjointed in the latter half. I haven't read the light novels, so I'm not sure if the anime adaptation left important details out, but the series feels like it's all over the place once it tries to incorporate a more serious plot. Again, this isn't a bad show by any means, but it's definitely Trigger's weakest TV show in my opinion. However, this was only the second show the studio produced. It was a little bit of a sophomore slump, but nothing that they couldn't recover from.
I'm sorry! I apologize for everything I did, so please forgive me. I really didn't know anything about all that stuff I just said.
Number 7. SSSS.GRIDMAN. SSSS.GRIDMAN is one of 2 Trigger anime that are part of, or at least spin-offs of, the Ultra series, which admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about. This series was also the beginning of the Gridman Universe project. The gist of it is there's an agent from a digital world named Gridman who comes to the human world in order to defend it from kaiju. I like the designs of the kaiju, and the fights are pretty cool to watch, I'll say that much. They give me a Power Rangers meets Transformers feel. The characters are also likable enough, but most of them just feel like they exist. I feel like most of them could use more development, especially Rika and Utsumi. Not only that, but Yuta Hibiki, the main character, feels pretty bland to me. Not to mention he has amnesia throughout the whole series, so he's void of pretty much an entire personality. I'm not too fond of that aspect of the show either. The most interesting character is Akane Shinjo, and even her story feels half-baked. They try to explain why the world is the way it is and why kaiju keep appearing, but the story feels so unnecessarily convoluted. That being said, it is still intriguing and pretty engaging. Also, I really enjoy giant monster battles, so I have to give the show some points for that. The side characters also add some much needed personality to the show, and in my opinion, it's enough to make up for the lack of personality we get from the protagonist. I can't say SSSS.GRIDMAN would ever make any sort of favorites list of mine, but I believe the show has just slightly more going for it than against it.
Show yourself! Where'd you go, Gridman? Right here. Where?
Number 6. Space Patrol Luluco. This one's an outlier, and some people may think I shouldn't include it since each episode is only about 7 minutes long. However, it was aired on television, and it is a full Trigger production, which were my only 2 rules for this list. Therefore, it qualifies. However, since it's so short, the episodes naturally go by very quickly. Because of that, it's a little hard for me to keep up with the pacing. Plus, the little bit of plot there is in the show is inconsistent. It goes from one thing to another in an instant, like going from just going on space patrol to chasing a space pirate to being a romance, but let's be honest, this isn't a show that people watch for the plot, or characters, because there isn't much to them either. They watch it for the comedy, which is good, but I have the same issue with it that I have with Mighty Magiswords, in that the fast and slightly inconsistent pacing can have differing effects on a joke's delivery. The art style is unique, even compared to other Trigger shows. I don't know if chibi is the right word to describe the style, but the designs are a lot softer than in their other series. The show also has a fantastic ending theme song. I don't talk about ending themes by themselves a lot, but I like these types of songs that feel like they're putting you in a trance. The main aspect about Space Patrol Luluco is the fact that it basically canonized the Triggerverse. This isn't the only Trigger show that referenced others, but this one has full episodes that take place in the worlds of Kill la Kill and Little Witch Academia. Inferno Cop makes an appearance as well, and he has a clone in the show's own universe. Not a legitimate clone, but come on, it's pretty obvious where the inspiration came from.
You really think I look like Chief Overjustice? Ha ha ha! That is a good one!
Anyway, I've said this elsewhere, but I'll say it here too. I think the idea of a Triggerverse is great. Since Marvel popularized the idea of multiverses, everybody has been following that trend. I think it's overkill to be honest, but some interest me, and this is one of them. However, the main issue with that is the same for every multiverse. If you don't watch everything in the multiverse, you're going to be lost. That can be a problem with Space Patrol Luluco if you're not familiar with the other Trigger shows up to that point. I still think you can enjoy the show. It's not too reliant on the multiverse aspect, but you may not know some characters or understand some references if you're unfamiliar with those other shows. Regardless, this show is pretty fun, but it's not something that I think is remarkable on its own merit. Yeah, the Triggerverse is cool, but that's less about this show specifically and more about the studio as a whole. If you take that aspect away, it's just a kind of quirky, fun short comedy, but even so, it's an enjoyable watch.
You're under arrest!
How can you arrest me when I haven't done anything wrong?
You're free to go!
Number 5. SSSS.DYNAZENON. This is the second series in the Gridman universe project, and it serves as a sequel to SSSS.GRIDMAN. Even though it's a sequel and we do see a couple of returning characters, I wouldn't say you absolutely need to watch SSSS.GRIDMAN before you watch SSSS.DYNAZENON, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. The two shows take place in the same world, but Dynazenon stands on its own as it has a cast of new characters, and in my opinion, most of them are much more developed than a majority of the Gridman cast. They're also more entertaining to watch, especially Galma.
Listen to me closely. In this world, there are three things that people need to keep. The first is promises. And the next thing is... what was it again?
Plus, there's a more believable bond between the protagonists. In fact, I've seen this show being compared to another Trigger show that I'll talk about later as far as the bonds go. The antagonists in this show are also more interesting to me and easier to understand than Gridman's main antagonist. Another difference is this show gets pretty dark. Gridman has its heavier moments, but Dynazenon takes it up a notch, especially when it comes to Yume and her looking for information about her late sister. The way Dynazenon goes into battle is much different than how Gridman does. Gridman is just one person, whereas Dynazenon is made up of four. Also, Gridman relies on a specific computer to emerge, whereas Dynazenon is summoned by using what resemble toys. The explanations of how the kaiju came about differ between the two series as well. Personally, I think the kaiju designs and battles are better in this show than they are in Gridman. In general, this show just feels much stronger to me. It's not perfect though, as there are some details that they just gloss over, there are unanswered questions, and I wish we could have seen the show go a little deeper into some stories it tells, specifically with Koyomi. I feel like they were holding back on telling his whole story, but that might just be me. Yomogi as well, to a lesser extent. As a whole though, this show greatly exceeded my expectations. SSSS.GRIDMAN laid a solid foundation, but SSSS.DYNAZENON improved upon it greatly. If more shows come out of this project, I hope they continue to improve in quality.
Thanks. I'm super grateful to you for healing Dynazenon. Don't touch her so casually. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Number 4. BNA, Brand New Animal. BNA is one show in a long list of shows that immediately caught my attention just from the initial poster. After actually watching it for the first time, it left me confused. I liked it, but I felt like there were so many issues with it. However, when I watched it a second time, I understood it more. The premise is that a teenage girl turned beastman, Michiru Kagemori, flees to Anima City because she thinks she'll be accepted there since that's where all the beastmen live. This show tackles some heavy topics such as child trafficking, terrorism, and the biggest subject that the show revolves around, prejudice. See, I mentioned that all of the beastmen live in Anima City, but it's not exactly by choice. Most of the humans either hate the beastmen or are terrified of them, and vice versa. Plus, as I alluded to before, Anima City isn't exactly paradise. A lot of crime goes on, and it's just not a great place like Michiru initially thought. However, she ends up sort of teaming up with Shiro Ogami to try and make Anima City a better place. There's also a religious-based subplot that I think is a little messy in its execution, but much like with every other topic this show tackles, I at least commend it for trying. More often than not, they do a pretty good job. However, this show likes to use cop-out answers just to move the plot along. One thing that stands out to me in particular is the fact that it's not fully explained how Michiru keeps gaining new abilities like cheetah legs for speed or wings so she can fly. I guess it's implied that it's because her DNA is unstable due to the mutations, but I would have liked a little more explanation since it just keeps happening out of the blue and at the most convenient times. Like I said though, I understood this show more the second time I watched it. For example, when Michiru is asked why she doesn't morph into her human form when she has the ability to do so, she says remaining in her Tanuki form is easier for her. At first, I thought that was just a cop-out answer so the subject would be dropped and the episode would move along. Now I get it, because she was stuck as a beastman for about a year, so that's what feels normal to her now. Michiru's friend Nazuna grew on me during my second viewing as well. I didn't like her at first, but I understood her motives more the second time I watched the show. I know I keep mentioning that I needed a second watch through, and this isn't the only show that I watched twice, but it's the one I feel like I needed to watch twice the most in order to fully grasp it. Oh, and one more thing, I haven't mentioned the show's soundtrack yet. Well, BNA's soundtrack is great. There are a lot of catchy tunes, especially the ending theme, which is also played a lot throughout the actual show. Really, it adds so much to the feeling of this show. Sure, this series does deal with a lot of serious topics, like I said before, but it still has a fun nature to it, and despite its flaws and plot holes, I still think it's a great entry in the Trigger library.
Oh, you're the weasel. A mink. I'm not a weasel. My name is Marie the Mink.
Number 3. Keysniver. I stated earlier that SSSS.DYNAZENON has been compared to another Trigger show. Well, this is the one I was referring to. Keysniver is a character building show through and through. It focuses on a group of high school students that are being experimented on as they are part of the Keysna system. The Keysna system is a project that links the pain of everyone involved. Of course, the main protagonist, Katsuhira Agata, can't feel pain, so it affects him differently than it affects the others. For the most part, these students weren't even acquaintances prior to this experiment, but it manages to bring them together and tear them apart. Characters should always be a big priority in the show, but Keysniver really puts in the work to make the characters unique and interesting. They're all three-dimensional, and they all go through some sort of development, be it big or small. Not to mention the bonds they build with each other feel genuine. Sure, they're essentially forced to interact and cooperate with each other, but there are still times where we see them help each other out and just have fun together. On the other hand, there are also times where they end up hurting each other. It's mostly unintentional, but it leads to some very uncomfortably awkward situations. Not only that, but this show has one of the most intense scenes I've watched in recent memory, and I would love to showcase that scene here, but you really need the context of the episode in order to feel its full impact. Not a lot of shows can pull off building such a strong, well-knit cast by taking a bunch of people who are practically strangers and make them close like this, even if it's not something they necessarily agreed to. I really cannot praise this show enough for its premise alone, and there isn't a single character out of the main cast that I dislike. The only issue I really have with the show is the fact that I feel like some details are missing, but this is another show that I picked up on more things watching it the second time. Overall, Keysniver is an incredible anime, and it's a must-watch if you're a fan of watching characters come together and grow as individuals and as a group.
Jiggly jiggly! Yep! Summer!
Number 2. Little Witch Academia. It should come as no surprise that I'm a fan of this show since it heavily involves magic, but here's a fun fact for you all. I wasn't too big into the 2 Little Witch Academia movies that came out before the series. They were okay, with the second one being slightly stronger than the first, but I wasn't blown away by them, and I didn't think they were all that memorable. As for the series itself, well, that's a completely different story. The show follows Akko, who enrolls in Luna Nova Magical Academy, and she wishes to follow in the footsteps of her idol, Shiny Chariot. The only problem is, Akko has no magical abilities, so she has to work a lot harder than the other students if she wants to become a full-fledged witch. I know this kind of story has been done before and since. In fact, I didn't watch this series until I finished Season 1 of The Owl House, and there are plenty of comparisons to be made. Akko and Luz are similar characters, as are Diana and Amity, and to an extent Professor Ursula and Ida. Even taking the comparisons out of the equation, Little Witch Academia is just a blast to watch. It obviously takes inspiration from other magic school-based media, the obvious one being Harry Potter, of course, but it manages to forge its own identity as well. It creates unique situations, gives us tons of likable characters, and gives the viewer a reason to want to come back for more. The main reason being, at least for me, I want to see Akko succeed. She can come off as a slacker, but she really puts in a lot of effort because she wants to become a witch who can entertain people like Chariot did. Most people in the academy frown upon that dream, but Akko doesn't let that discourage her, and that's always admirable. And of course, I love all the different types of magic we see, like Susie with her mushrooms and potions, and Lotte's ability to contact spirits. The show also makes some interesting character design choices, like how Professor Croy looks like she's a villain straight out of Pokemon, and the cafe proprietor is the spitting image of Chumley from Pawn Stars. As a whole, this anime took me by surprise since, like I said before, I wasn't too big into the movies. The series gives the characters and ideas more time to flourish, especially since it's a 25 episode series as opposed to a 12 or 13 episode show. I would honestly consider this a must-watch for fans of magic. Even if you don't love it like I do, I'm sure you'll find something you enjoy.
You'll take me? Thanks so much! You restored my faith in witches!
Since there's only one show left to talk about, it's pretty obvious what I ranked at the top. Before we get there though, I just wanted to ask you all again to like, comment, and subscribe. Videos like this take a lot of time and effort, and I would appreciate any sort of interaction with this video, or any others, to let me know you guys want to see more Cartoon Obsession content. Alright, enough stalling. Let's get into what I think is Studio Trigger's best TV anime series. Number 1. Kill la Kill. I know I said I didn't want to make this list too predictable, but was there ever any doubt on what would top it? I'll say this first. Kill la Kill is absolutely ridiculous. That's not too surprising though, since the director previously worked on Fooly Cooly, which I'm not a big fan of, but I should give it another chance. I should also mention that a lot of the people who worked on Kill la Kill also worked on Gurren Lagann, which was also over the top, and it is referenced in the show more than once. In case you weren't aware, Gurren Lagann was made by Gainax, not Trigger. I just figured I'd mention that since it's a common misconception. Anyway, Kill la Kill follows Ryuko Matoi as she enters Honnouji Academy to find out who killed her father. There, she meets the student council president Satsuki Kiryuin, who becomes her rival, and Satsuki puts Ryuko through all sorts of trials. There are also articles of clothing called Goku uniforms, and the ones Ryuko and Satsuki wear are called Kamawis. The clothing plays a major role in this show, so I don't want to talk about it too much for those who haven't watched it, but I will say these uniforms give the wearer extra strength and powers. The show also has a lot of action, violence, comedy, and larger-than-life characters like Mako, Gamagori, etc. I would say this show goes from 0 to 100 in an instant, but I actually think it's more accurate to say that it starts at 100 and gets even more amped up as it goes on. The plot twist this show has really backs that statement up, and it is quite a doozy for sure. Kill la Kill also leans heavily into the ecchi spectrum. It's extremely lewd. Tons of characters are either completely or mostly naked at one point or another, and there are some very uncomfortable scenes between Satsuki and her mother. Love the scenes or hate them, they do their job at making Ragyo an easy villain to despise. Although she does have an epic theme song. In fact, the entire soundtrack to the show is epic. Actually, this entire show as a whole is epic. It's not easy to make a great show that's completely over the top and pretty much never slows down, but Trigger pulled it off with Kill la Kill. It has something for everybody. There's drama, comedy, action, fan service, blood, little hints of romance at the very least, and just an unforgettable experience overall. This may be an overwhelming show for someone who's just getting into anime, but at the same time, I think it's a good showcase of the best traits the medium has to offer. I don't consider Kill la Kill to be perfect, but I do consider it to be an iconic series, and even though this was only their first offering, I certainly consider it to be Studio Trigger's best anime so far. Will they ever be able to top it? It's possible, as long as they keep trying new ideas. To the people at Trigger, thank you for 10 years of excellence. Here's to many more, and most importantly, don't lose your way. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you have any other cartoons, anime, or other animated works that you want me to talk about in the future, please let me know. After all, it's not my channel, it's our channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and feel free to check out my social media pages, audition for an outro, and join the official Cartoon Obsession Discord, the links for all of which are in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
I'm Izuku Midoriya, and thank you for watching Cartoon Obsession. Go beyond! Plus Ultra!